Tokyo is the largest city in the world with a population of 38 million and growing. Tokyo has 23 wards, but it continuously expands much further. Here's what that scale actually looks like. Tokyo is very diverse with many identities, and I was lucky enough to spend about a month in Tokyo, and in this video I'm going to talk about what I saw and my experiences there. Tokyo is a perfect example of a modern metropolis. Its scale, transit, design, history, culture, etc. are things that just aren't seen anywhere else in the world. Tokyo isn't perfect, however. Although cars are less invasive in Tokyo than, say, anywhere in North America, Tokyo still accommodates to cars more than, say, in places like Western Europe, I'd say. Japan has an impressive road network. Odaiba Mall on Tokyo Bay is a perfect example. Odaiba has two rail connections, the Yurakamome and Rinkai lines. Sorry if I butchered that. However, the two malls that I visited in this area were about half shopping areas and half parking garages, with seemingly most visitors driving to the mall using the massive roads that connect the whole area. One of the most impressive things I noticed about Tokyo's urbanism is the sheer density of commercial space. In areas like Shibuya or Shinjuku, there are countless shops and restaurants on a scale I've never seen before. Usually, commercial space is only at the ground floor, but in Tokyo, they utilize seemingly every floor of buildings and have small passages and access elevators to connect them all. The density of attractions that this creates is something that has truly impressed and overwhelmed me. These buildings, full of commercial space, are almost scarily dense. The risk of fires and earthquakes make using these buildings a little worrying, but Tokyo's safety codes are meant to mitigate these risks. Tokyo is a city of many commercial districts with many neighborhoods that are world or locally famous for very certain specific things. For example, Ginza for luxury shopping, Akihabara for anime and video games, Keppabashi for kitchenware, Harajuku and Shimokizawa for thrifting, etc. Something that really surprised me about Tokyo was the seemingly small number of people on bicycles. Bike lanes on roads were pretty common, but I rarely saw dedicated bike paths. And even though I often saw bikes locked in front of buildings, seeing them actually being used was pretty rare. One type of bike lane that I saw a ton was the painted sidewalk bike lane, where both pedestrians and cyclists shared the elevated sidewalk, and the only real division between pedestrian and cycling areas was paint with icons on the ground. I honestly love this kind of bike lane and hope to see it more in North America, where even in some of our best cities like New York, cyclists are often unprotected and unprioritized on busy streets. And with these sidewalk bike lanes, they are completely off the street and are able to share the road, and they're with pedestrians on the sidewalk, which I think is less dangerous than, say, the risks of crosswalks on bike lanes that are on roads. Tokyo has many amazing parks, the most notable being the Central Park that hosts the Imperial Palace. This park was very unique. The main aspect that I found unique was the many moats that surrounded and cut through the park. Wide roads separated this park from urban areas surrounding it, but I liked how they used large plazas, dirt plazas, to give some space in between the actual activities in the park and the roads, so it wasn't that invasive by the roads. Yoyogi Park, which houses the Meiji Shrine, was also amazing and much more serene and calm and isolated than the Imperial Park. And then there was Ueno Park on the other side of the city, which was also amazing. It honestly reminded me a bit of like European parks, like maybe Parc Monceau in Paris, just the layout, and it did have European themed buildings in it, so maybe that was why. And parks in Tokyo are kind of hard to come by, but when you do, they are pretty amazing. As you probably know, there's vending machines all over Tokyo, including in parks, subway stations, alleys, malls, etc. And having them in parks I thought was really nice, just to cool off during the summer heat. And I honestly cannot fathom how they keep all these vending machines always stocked and always running, but they do somehow. Trash cans were very hard to come by in Tokyo. A lot of people attribute this to the terrorist attack that took place in Tokyo in 1995, where they hid poison gas in the subway. But anyway, there aren't many trash cans in Tokyo. Um, but many tourists and like convenience stores that sell portable goods in wrappers, vending machines, and just like a strong drinking culture and very few amount of trash cans seems like a recipe for disgusting streets. However, Tokyo has some of the cleanest streets that I've ever seen in a major city. Tokyo seems to do this in two kind of ways. First, in like crowded large areas like Shibuya, or say the area surrounding Tokyo Station. Tokyo uses the water street cleaners that you can find in like Europe and some American cities where they just spray the ground and clean it. Pretty standard. But the second way that they do this is they do it through a sense of community in residential neighborhoods that are less touristy and less populated. Residents tend to keep their spaces clean, and in shared areas, elderly citizens take care of the responsibility of keeping these streets clean just through their sense of responsibility for the community, I guess. And no city is perfect, however. During my time, I did see very dirty areas and even rats. But when you consider how big Tokyo is, and that I only encountered this type of stuff a handful of times during my month there, I'd still say Tokyo's cleanliness is amazing, but it's not perfect like some social media posts would have you think. It seems like Tokyo rebuilt after World War II differently in certain areas. Some areas were rebuilt organically or chaotically, possibly in a way that is similar to neighborhoods that stood before the bombings. These neighborhoods have small, windy streets and narrow alleyways that feel much like medieval city layouts of Europe. But the Tokyo government has a love-hate relationship with these neighborhoods as they are symbolic of Japanese culture, but they are earthquake and fire hazards. And then on the opposite end of the spectrum, some neighborhoods that were rebuilt remind me of the grid-like sprawl of, say, like Chicago or other U.S. cities. U.S. politicians in power in Japan after the war might have actually had something to do with this, as organic settlements that popped up after the war were often relocated to more organized street grids by these US forces. And most of Tokyo's central business district office areas feel extremely inorganic as well, although they are much more lively than most CBDs around the world. And even though many urbanists rag on them, I actually like their CBDs and the skyscraper boom areas. I personally like skylines, and so I thought these were great areas for the skyline, as Tokyo has multiple skylines that are formed by these different CBDs. As far as Tokyo's local transit network, it's worshipped by many urbanists around the world and seemingly locals alike. In my opinion, Tokyo's transit network blows any of the other systems I've ridden completely out of the water. That includes NYC, Paris, London, Madrid, etc. I don't think those even come close. So starting off with the Tokyo Metro, the first of 3 metro systems I'll be covering in Tokyo, consists of 9 lines, 180 stations, and 7.4 million people ride this metro per day, according to Wikipedia. It spans about 200 kilometers or 125 miles. The stations are pretty uniform in like their aesthetics and how they look, but not really at all in their functional design. What that means is they look the same in their signage and their coloring and all that, but there are so many different passageways, walkways, crossovers, etc. that like no station is designed the same in its layout. And all stations have just about all signage in both Japanese and English. And as I learned when trying to get my Metro card on my first night in Tokyo, ticket machines did not take cards or Apple Pay, only cash, if I figure that out right. Tokyo's transit network makes up for this by having amazing digital Passmo and Suica cards that are super easy to add to your wallet and recharge on your phone. And the longest I waited for a Metro ride in Tokyo during my entire stay, including after a night out, which was pretty late at night, was only about 10 minutes. Most of the time, trains ran about every 2 minutes, and even during rush hour, if you really wanted to get on a train, you could. Train cars themselves are all modern, climate controlled, and with screens that display ads and the next stops in multiple languages. Trains had priority seating sections at both ends of most cars, and most train cars allowed for passengers to pass between cars. For most of my time in Tokyo, I stayed right next to the Akasaka Mitsuke station, which was served by the Ginza, Marunouchi, and basically Hanzomo lines. The station was amazing for connectivity and frequency, and it's built under a big camera and shopping street, which was pretty cool. And the surrounding area of the station is mostly commercial, and there's so many little pathways and major roads that lead to the station that make it super accessible. Here's a digital image of what the station actually looks like, which I think is pretty insane to show you those complex layouts of these stations. The second of the three metro systems I'm covering is the Toei subway, with 4 lines that span 110 kilometers or 70 miles, have 106 stations, and about 3 million daily riders. The Toei subway is also a crucial part of Tokyo's transit network. Trains and stations are basically the same as Tokyo Metro, and many stations that serve both don't even have a transfer. And at another place I stayed during my time, I was on the Uedo line, which was a very unique design. It's not quite a loop, but it does reconnect back to itself, and despite the odd design of this line, it is what I would say a powerhouse of Tokyo's transit network, connects the city and many other lines of the metro. Next up is the third metro system. Some might not even consider it that. They might consider it like a commuter rail type of thing, but I would say that the JR lines are a metro system. They operate 23 lines within the greater Tokyo area with around 16 million daily riders. That includes transferring, which sometimes counts twice, but still 16 million daily riders. These lines are generally much longer than the other two metro systems, and stops are less frequent, serving only larger hubs in the city center, and then serving more as commuter rail once outside the city center. JR line stations are much more regional rail-like than the other metro stations, as I think trains are much longer, and many of these stations are above ground instead of in a subway form. The JR lines are operated by JR East, which is the largest passenger rail company in the world, and they also operate the Shinkansen regional rail lines that I'll get to later. And the most famous JR line, without a doubt, is the Yamanote line, which encircles the center of Tokyo and connects many of Tokyo's busiest hubs, including Shinjuku Station. Touching on Shinjuku Station, Shinjuku is the busiest train station in the world, with about 3.5 million passengers passing through every day, which is roughly the entire metro population of Tampa passing through every single day. So the entire city of Tampa going through one building every single day. Around the 1970s, when Japan's population was booming after World War II, instead of building a highway, Tokyo built Shinjuku Station to allow for the western suburbanization of the city, centered around rail transit that connected center Tokyo to the western suburbs. I accidentally ended up in Shinjuku once after getting on the wrong train, and it took me about an hour and a half to find my way to the right place, just due to the immense scale of the station. The JR lines have different sounds in the Tokyo Metro. The tones they use are peaceful, and for some reason I really like them compared to the usual monotonous nature of subway systems and the robotic voices.
The next station is Shibuya, JY20. The doors on the right side will open. Please change your floor. The Tokyo Toyoko line.
During my time in Japan, I also took day trips to Yokohama and Kamakura. These are, some would consider them different cities than Tokyo, but I'd say they're part of the greater Metro Tokyo area, so I'm putting them in the Tokyo video. I took express metro trains. Yokohama felt almost too clean and like a sterile suburb of Tokyo when I was in the CBD. But when I left for the suburbs, it was very calm and more similar to other parts of Tokyo with the peaceful neighborhoods that you might think of. The Yokohama Metro was very different from Central Tokyo lines in both station design and frequency. I really loved the Yokohama station designs. They seemed to be more playful and colorful than those of Central Tokyo. And Yokohama had 2 rail stations, one seemingly serving mostly commuter rail lines and metro trains, and then there's Shin Yokohama on the edge of town, away from the coast, which was along the Shinkansen lines and handles mostly regional rail. Kamakura felt like a small beach town, and I could barely tell that it was a part of the greater Tokyo area. Honestly, the beach kind of sucked, but the town was nice, and the express trains from Tokyo and the local tram were also impressive, which I rode. All in all, Greater Tokyo has the most extensive urban rail network and the most used in the world, with 40 million passengers although transfers between networks often tally twice in the metro area daily out of a population of 36 million. So 40 million people ride the urban railway network every day, and there's an urban metro population of 36 million. So there are 882 interconnected rail stations in the Tokyo metropolis, with several hundred more in each of the three surrounding densely populated suburban prefectures. There are 30 operators running 121 passenger rail lines, 102 serving Tokyo and 19 more serving Greater Tokyo but not Tokyo City Center. And then excluding about 12 cable cars that also are in Tokyo. Tokyo's rail network is in a league of its own as far as sheer passenger volume. You could definitely tell when using the network. I made a great use of this network, and I spent a little too much time on my phone. Now for the regional transit. As far as regional transit goes, all roads lead to Tokyo in Japan. Tokyo has a few main train stations, including Tokyo Station, Shimbashi, and Shin Yokohama. I only ever saw Shinkansen trains in Japan, but they still do have more standard trains, I just never saw them. Riding the Shinkansen for the first time was, to say the least, a crazy experience for me. First of all, the stations are almost always extremely crowded and super chaotic. Ticket machines give you the chance to buy tickets in person, which, if done right, can be a super simple process, considering that Japan does a great job with capacity and you'll almost always be able to get on a train eventually in the same day. Tokyo Station is huge with tons of shops, including bento restaurants that sell train-themed bento boxes, and even a Suica/transit-themed store that sells little Tokyo Transit-related gifts. And then once you're ready to actually enter the platform area, you put your ticket through the gate where it's stamped and then returned to you. And they also have super helpful staff at all the gates in case you need any help. The boarding procedures, especially on non-reserved seat cars, are usually pretty hectic to say the least. There's lines on the platform that you wait in, and you just have to wait in line until you can get on the train. But often a lot of people are standing in the middle of the aisles and stuff like that. But I mean, it gets people where they need to go. It's just not super calm, I'd say. The trains always arrive on time and leave not a second later. My ticket was never checked on the train when I rode, but the staff are on the train busy doing things. The trains are super, super fast. An entire train will pass by your window in, I'd say, about 2 seconds at full speed of 285 kilometers or 177 miles per hour, at least on the lines that I rode. And trains depart Tokyo Station every few minutes, and multiple trains in each direction are always leaving. Trains were super clean, and they had a green, which I found out was like a premium car option. The only thing that kind of unpleasantly surprised me was the steep price of most tickets. Despite the frequency, don't expect these tickets to be super cheap. I paid about an average of $70 each way for mine, which I mean isn't bad at all, but it also just wasn't as cheap as I was expecting. The Shinkansens are a marvel of human engineering. They've had 0 fatal accidents over their 60 years in operation, and they were honestly just super impressive to me. Tokyo also has an extensive bus network with about 200 routes that stretch about 1,100 kilometers or 700 miles. Virtually all the lines in downtown Tokyo are operated by the Toei bus, with more suburban lines being shared by multiple operators. Buses in Tokyo were much smaller than other buses I've ridden. They were rarely full, always clean, and with signage in both Japanese and English. And if I remember correctly, in Tokyo, you board from the front and pay before sitting down, whereas in other parts of Japan like Kyoto or Osaka, you board from the middle of the bus and you pay in the front as you're getting off, which I thought was an interesting distinction. Buses weren't as punctual as, say, the metro or the regional rail, especially during rush hour. Buses would get stuck in traffic and be a few minutes late, nothing serious. I really liked the bus stops. Their signage showed where the next bus was and how much time until it arrived. And at large bus terminals, they were kind of like train stations where they would have platforms where you'd wait for the bus, which were accessed via underground walkways, much like train stations. Tokyo also has many regional buses that terminate at places like Shinjuku, and all in all, bus drivers were pretty nice. but they definitely don't interact with passengers as much as many drivers would in the US. They're more serious. Switching back to metro lines briefly, I want to quickly highlight one particular line in Tokyo, which is the Odiyaku Odawara line. Hopefully I said that right. It's owned and operated by the Odiyaku Electric Railway, and this line runs from Shinjuku to Odawara with 47 stations in total. It was opened in 1927 and has since been continually modernized and electrified, with modern rolling stock that is used by 1.5 million people daily. And I basically love everything about this line: the modern station designs, the color scheme, the train cars, and especially the areas it serves. I only rode to the first few stations, but those areas were an urbanist paradise. Starting from Shinjuku, the line goes south and then west to the Shimokitazawa area. Shimokitazawa was an amazing area with tons of thrift stores and interesting restaurants. And then further out on the line, around Setagaya Daita, the track runs underground with an amazing walking and biking trail above it. This is what one of the stations that connects to this trail looks like. Pretty amazing. And then also on this track was a shop cluster called Bonus Track, where many small businesses were in a shipping container sized spaces on the walking trail, which I thought was pretty cool. And then the neighborhoods surrounding this area and this pathway were low rise residential with seemingly many families from the people that I saw walking. And then there were amazing parks like Hanegi Park that were found along this line. And then further down the line were many shrines and little neighborhoods with shopping clusters around the stations. All in all, I just love this line. One, for its design. I like the color. I like the trains that it used. I like the design where it goes from at grade to underground. And I think it goes elevated further down the line, but I'm not sure. I never rode that far. And the stations are amazing. They're super, super modern. And then just the neighborhoods around it. It starts off in Shinjuku, which is probably the tallest skyline in Tokyo. And then it phases out into smaller, low-rise neighborhoods with many parks and restaurants around it. And restaurant clusters around the station, I think, are a great touch that really could be replicated more in America. And this is one of the lines that I was talking about earlier with the building of Shinjuku in the 70s. Instead of building a highway here, they built this line, and now there's parks, restaurants, whole neighborhoods based around this line that want to be as close to this line as possible, which I think is really amazing and honestly something that America or elsewhere could consider when proposing a highway road to allow for suburbanization. Tokyo is served by two airports, Haneda and Narita. Haneda is closer to the central city but tends to serve more domestic flights from what I've seen. And you can access the airport using the Tokyo monorail, which is hailed as maybe the world's best monorail line. And I'm honestly not quite sure how, but there are express monorail trains that run almost directly from Haneda to the center of the city. But I never noticed any like passing or extra rails for them to ride on, so that's why I'm not sure how they do it, but they do apparently. And Narita has an expensive airport train that'll take you to and from the airport. However, I never saw it. So I only ever flew in and out of Narita, so I didn't even get to see Haneda, but I like Narita. And I thought the destinations on the signboard were really cool. Many unique locations that I've never seen on signboards from the airports in America or Europe. And I flew from Narita to Seattle, where I was able to see the light rail, which I thought was pretty cool. And so, all in all, I absolutely love the urbanism in Tokyo. And I think that all of its transit systems could be argued as the best in the world. So, if you are interested in learning more, I would definitely recommend reading the book Emergent Tokyo, Designing the Spontaneous City. It covered in depth some unique aspects of Tokyo's urban design, and I thought it was really cool. While I was there, I was able to see some of the things and places it was talking about in person. And so, yeah, it's definitely a great book, and that's where I would go if I wanted to learn more.